the last thing you want to be doing is doing it yourself and not knowing what you're doing. That's the one way for sure you will fail. Um, if you're not dynamically pricing or using the right software or listed on both Airbnb and VRBO, like because you don't know that they exist or whatever it is, right? You're not hiring a professional photographer to take your photos. I mean, that's like you might as well just light your money on fire. If you're not going to pay a photographer to take pictures of your listing and make it look professional, these are the kinds of things that are just absolutely essential.
This is the Yield Coach Show, episode 32. I am your host, Ian Brown. Every episode, we bring you dynamic entrepreneurs, real estate investors, business leaders, and inspirational guests ready to open up, share their story, the good, the bad, the ugly, so you can learn lessons, gain advantages, and accelerate your success. Quick announcement, we have opened our doors to outside accredited investors for opportunities in the greater Northeast Florida area. Hit us up on yield-coach.com for opportunities and access to our investor portal. Okay, very excited about today's guest. We've actually got more overlap than he even knows. We have Jeff Iloulian here with us, and Jeff is the founder and owner of Host GPO. He has been in the vacation rental industry for nearly a decade, managed and/or operated over 250 vacation rentals, from cozy cabins to woods to luxury mansions in Beverly Hills. Jeff is also coming with an economics and philosophy background from Columbia University and a JD from UCLA School of Law. After a few years practicing law, he decided to become an entrepreneur. Wonderful. I know a guy like that. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Ian.
Wonderful. I kind of let the cat out of the bag there. So we'll jump into your background and stuff, but some of the audience already knows. So I'm a Florida attorney, broker, appraiser. I did all those things. And right now I've folded them all into investment, but I did about 7 to 8 years of real estate law in addition to those other things. And I was like, by God, there's no end. I've got to go entrepreneurial. And so we could probably share legal stories, but I knew I was not going to be retiring from that field as a practitioner. But Jeff, welcome. Tell us about yourself and your background.
Yeah, thank you so much. Always nice to meet another fellow recovering attorney. I practiced law for about 3 years. Really, I did enjoy it. It was all right, but didn't see it as kind of the future. And like most people who get into vacation rentals and Airbnbs, kind of fell into it by accident. I read an article about lease arbitrage in 2014, thought it was a really interesting idea, and started my vacation rental by happenstance by leasing the house across the street from me. Leased it, furnished it, put it on the short-term rental market, and made a great return right out of the gate. Thought, this is cool. I'm going to do this again. Did it 5 times, 50 times, 150 times, and really grew a great vacation rental business out of it that I operated for about 5 or 6 years. Learned a lot about vacation rentals, a lot about lease arbitrage, property management, real estate in general. And one of the big pain points that I had was purchasing furniture, linens, mattresses, amenities, all the things that kind of go inside of a vacation rental unit. This was a big issue for me operating that many units. And I know it's a big issue for a lot of folks, even if you have just a handful. So Host GPO, which is the company that I started about 3 years ago, 2.5, 3 years ago, essentially what we are is a buying group where once you join us as a member, you can purchase furniture, linens, mattresses, amenities, etc., services from brands like West Elm, Pottery Barn, Crate and Barrel, CB2, Article, Rugs USA, Google Nest, Ace Hardware, you name it, at 30, 40, 50, 60% off. And the reason is because you're a part of a group of people that represent over 200,000 listings. And collectively, we're buying so much stuff in volume that we're able to get discounts. So happy to talk a little bit about Host GPO, but that's kind of the journey from starting as an attorney, learning all the lessons the hard way about how to operate vacation rental units, and then trying to solve my own problem by starting a company that really focused on streamlining purchasing for the things you need to operate a vacation rental.
So I think we rescheduled this, and I'm sure it was my fault. And now I'm really wishing we had it because we're recording this going into February. of 2023. And I think if we did this episode right when we were supposed to, I would have had this conversation with you before I spent $30,000 furnishing my my coastal 4-unit luxury short-term rental here in Atlantic Beach. So, well, damn, I'll have to buy more property and use your platform. But I can see the benefit of the collect. I mean, I want to talk more about that, of course, but you know, the
Sure.
collective buying power. Because I did what a lot of people do, I presume. I'm on Home Depot and Lowe's for appliances. I'm on various sites. Honestly, a lot of Amazon, a fair little things from Etsy, little things from Wayfair. But no, I mean, I was actually just on your social media, your Instagram before we went on, and like the stuff you've curated is awesome. And for those that are listening that might have even one Airbnb, or we can talk about arbitrage because I'm not sure if everybody's going to know that just hearing the word, but these
Sure.
arbitrage plays and how to grow and scale. I mean, having a curated list at a discount, even if it wasn't discounted, just like assembling things for people visually is big because you don't know how things are going to look when you grab something off Amazon, something off Etsy, something off of Wayfair. So cool. If you could, can we jump into my first question? Your arbitrage plays, what market, kind of how'd you scale that up? Did you have any problem negotiating with landlords? Kind of explain the arbitrage part of your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So just like by quick explanation, arbitrage essentially is where you, at least in this instance, there's a lot of different types of arbitrage, you know, financial markets, et cetera. But when you're talking about lease arbitrage for vacation rental units, you're talking about leasing a home for, let's say, $3,000 or $5,000 a month, right? Let's just say 5,000, it's a round number, right? You lease a home for $5,000, you buy furniture, you put it inside, and then you rent it on the short-term market, hoping that you will get more than $5,000 per month on a short-term basis, right? People are willing to pay more for short-term rentals, short-term stays. You know, you might get something like $1,000 or $1,200 on a weekend night, depending on kind of your market, right? And so ultimately, if you walk away with $8,000 at the end of the month, you made $3,000 in profit. Arbitrage, the difference between the 5,000 and the 3,000 and the 8,000. So that's kind of what lease arbitrage is. Now, my model specifically when I got started in 2014 was based geographically down here in Southern California. And I had a really interesting play on arbitrage, which was I was going to developers and contractors or you know, folks who are flipping homes. And in Southern California, when you purchase a home, the entitlement process to get a permit to either demolish and build something bigger or new can take 12 to 18 months. So my original model was I was chasing down developers, and once they purchased a home and the family that was living there was going to move out, they didn't want to release that home out because it could have been anywhere from, you know, 12 months, maybe 9 months if they got it quick, to 18 months. And they wanted to be able to knock that home down without having to ask somebody to leave, you know, immediately. And so these homes were going to be sitting empty. So my original model was going to developers and offering 50% of the market rent. So for example, if the market rent was $5,000, I was offering them $2,500 and saying, I will take the home tomorrow. You can let me know 2 weeks before you want it back, and I'll never call you for anything. I will do all of the work, all the property management stuff. You know, if I got to snake a drain, if I've got to, you know, some minor sort of work or deal with the gardeners or anything like that, I'll handle everything. You'll never hear from me. Let me know when you want it back. And so the flip side for them was they would have been getting zero. Or they would have to find a property manager or figure out how to lease the home to somebody on a short-term basis. This was a really easy play. It was really hands-off. They knew they were going to get their rent, you know, next day and always on time. And then I was turning around, furnishing those units and then re-renting them at, you know, back then you could get 3 times market rent. So I would be renting that home that I was leasing for $2,500 for, let's just say $15,000 a month, minus expenses, clearing a good chunk of change and deciding to replicate that over and over and over again.
I really like that. I'd like the audience to just dwell on the fact or focus on the fact that you found a unique niche and with these developers and a unique motivation. They want to tear it down and rebuild it, but they're just in a holding pattern with the municipality. So you go to them, and they're not in the business of leasing property. You know, if you're a property developer or if, you know, a ground up developer, I think I want people to hear that, because Jeff, your angle was unique and novel and unique to your story. And I think some people are like, how come what Ian said or Jeff said is not working for me? Well, you need to think about your situation and where these opportunities are. I think that's a good example of being creative. So you got up to 150. I mean, were they all in Southern California? How spread out was your portfolio?
Mostly in Southern California. They kind of range from the Malibu area, Beach City, all the way through downtown Los Angeles, and then a little bit further south towards Palm Springs. There were a handful that I started managing just, remotely on the East Coast, et cetera. But the large lion's share of the portfolio was in Southern California.
Did you say you had some on the East Coast as well?
Yeah, I was managing some on the East Coast, just because once I got to about 50 properties, I started doing property management as well. So for those of you that aren't familiar with what that looks like in the vacation rental industry, it's often called co-hosting. And essentially what you do is you find somebody who has a home that wants to get into vacation rentals. It doesn't require any outlay of cash. You don't have to lease a place. You don't have to necessarily put any capital in, but you offer to, it used to be 25%. Now market rate is closer to 20%. You offer to, for 20% of the income, manage the listing, the pricing, the messaging, guest communications, the cleaners, any maintenance work, etc. And that can be done remotely or kind of on site if it's remote and you have at least one person on the ground or a really talented cleaner or somebody that can open the door. I mean, you can really manage somebody else's home for 20%. And if you know what you're doing, which I did after running 50 properties, it's a great way to kind of make additional income that's really low risk. So after about 50 properties, I started doing a split of arbitrage on the properties that I could find to lease and management on properties that were good deals.
I love this. And of course, I don't want to say it's not capital intensive, but relative, this show is going to have more of an audience of like hard asset like real estate investors, where your arbitrage model, you don't have to buy the real estate. You don't have to go to a closing. You don't have to find a mortgage. I mean, I imagine you could probably get some very low interest or zero interest credit lines to start getting some of these furnishings. And maybe you have to store some of it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm just kind of thinking through your model. Did you ever have an issue where, I think you said 5 minutes ago, the owners could let you know like 2 weeks before when they're coming back? What about like how far out your bookings went? Did you ever run into any issues? Did you not let people book way in advance because of that? How did you manage that?
Yeah. So essentially we'd kind of just be in touch with the owners every now and then, be like, hey, how's it looking? Generally they're going to have a decent idea. Obviously for that first kind of 9 months or year, you're not even going to be close. So for that period, we would leave the calendar wide open. Then as it got closer to the end of the year, we'd start shortening that window to something closer to 2 weeks. And in general, especially back then, especially in a very demand heavy market, like an urban metropolitan area, the booking window tends to be very short. And as long as you're pricing well and know how to do dynamic pricing, you really, it can even be more lucrative, because essentially what dynamic pricing reveals in a lot of different capacities. One thing is the best seat is the last seat you sell on the airplane, right? That's the most expensive one. So the last booking that happens next day in a short-term rental tends to be the most expensive, because it's kind of when somebody is showing up. So, that didn't really affect overall bookings that much. And yeah, the booking windows kind of adjusted based on the homes.
All right. You're going to have to forgive me. I told you before we jumped in, I personally have 7 short-term rentals. I own the real estate and run them. Some of them I run them as like midterm. Old news to you, but for the audience, midterm corporate, these are not really short-term. And so in Florida, not unlike a lot of other states, at 6 months, technically 6 months in a day, no short-term tax. So in Florida, depending on what county you're in, you're going to save 14%, 12%. It depends. It's a state and local layer. Sometimes there's a third layer. So where I am, it will save me like 13% if I go 6 months in a day. So I started off trying to do monthlies. Then I was like, well, I'm gonna try 6 months and see if people will pay like roughly the same for 1 month as they would for 6 months. And although the demand, there were fewer people, but I was always able to grab somebody. So for 3 years, I've, knock on wood, I've never had a significant vacancy at the 2 at the beach that I run as like medium term. And I don't have any special software. I only have to do 4 leases a year. That one's pretty straightforward. But now I just onboarded, and I talked to Jeff about this for the show, for short-term rentals, true short-term rentals at the beach. And it's really stress testing my operation. So forgive me, Jeff, I'm going to hit you with some more operations questions.
Of course.
How about, I love what you did with like aggregating the buying power for this host GPO. How did you handle, like, what do you have any recommendations for the audience or perhaps the host on the dynamic pricing tools that you like or would endorse?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are 3 or 4 kind of key dynamic pricing tools out there. So you've got Price Labs, Beyond Pricing, Wheelhouse, and I think Rented is another one. I would highly recommend looking into them. Some of them are better for more sophisticated operations, like a Wheelhouse. That's a super powerful tool. And for those of you that are getting started out, like a Beyond Pricing or a Price Labs is a great option. Now, if you're just getting into the space, you might be tempted to use something like Airbnb's smart pricing tool or VRBO's smart pricing tool. Those are awful. They're really, really poorly executed. They're not incentivized or aligned to make you the most return. They're incentivized to create the most bookings and also to, I guess, get guests to have great experiences. They're also not that sophisticated. So a Price Labs will allow you to do, or Beyond Pricing will allow you to do much more work to dynamically price your listing. And so at a very basic level, that's things like scouring and searching all the other listings that are out there, knowing when events or things are happening in your area and increasing pricing for those, increasing pricing on holidays. All that stuff happens automatically. And you can set more sophisticated things like what the minimum amount you want to take is, the minimum amount of nights you want to take on a weekend or weekday, how you want to price things like orphan nights, which are what you call when you have 2 reservations with a gap in between them. There's a lot of very sophisticated and powerful tools that a pricing software will allow you to do. So those are a couple that are the most popular, and I definitely recommend probably one of the 3 most important things in starting out a vacation rental is having a dynamic pricing tool already incorporated.
Thank you. And I actually was, I think a year now, I've been using the Beyond Pricing app, considering moving to, I might try Price Labs next. And you're right. There were some nights where, just as a quick little anecdote, the Florida Georgia game is it's a regular season football game, but it packs this. I'm in Jacksonville. It packs Jacksonville out. It's very close to Halloween. It's always within a day or 2 of Halloween. People are dressed crazy, drinking heavily, having fun, and this city is a party. And I forgot to change my pricing, and a year ago, somebody got my now it's a studio. It's not a big party. But they got it for like $99 at a time when it probably should have been like $250. And I probably should have put like a 3-day minimum on it. So again, does it make or break my year? No, but it would mean in the aggregate, you start doing this, you leave a lot of money on the table. And so for those of you that haven't heard of these like dynamic pricing tools, I use Beyond. I actually am going to try Price Labs. And with Wheelhouse, Jeff, is that something that you said is for more sophisticated operations? Can you elaborate on that a little more?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think tools like Wheelhouse are great when you are operating 50 plus units. It allows you to do even more complex things that, generally speaking, if you have a handful of units, you probably don't even need, or the ROI is not going to be there in terms of your investment and time. But, you can do things like hybrid pricing models that, really account for, things like midterm stays for short-term stays. There's a lot of really sophisticated integrations that they have into, property management softwares, et cetera. So they're more geared towards, in my experience, the larger operators in terms of like the service and support that they offer, but also the tools that they offer. I think of it something more of like, if you were just starting an email campaign, you might be familiar with a company like MailChimp. But if you are an email marketing expert and guru, there's way more complex email marketing tools out there. But you might not need it if you're only sending emails to a couple thousand people.
I completely agree. Yes, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. We're onboarding. we're onboarding this like active campaign and lead magnet, and that's a different episode. I don't have enough brain power right now to go down that. The joys of business ownership. So it's funny. I have 3 copies of the cash flow quadrant. Kiyosaki's like second purple book, and it's my favorite one he did. And sometimes I just have to like flip through that book again to remind myself, remember, you're trying to be over here on the B&I side, not the E&S. Cause like I keep creeping down to that S, you know what I mean? You just can't, it's like you keep rolling up your sleeves trying to do all this stuff. And you're like, by God, I'm a freaking S right now. Um, so what was the largest like portfolio you ran at like one time?
The most units I ran was 150. So that was operating all together.
Wow.
And those were both, massive homes, 7-8 bedroom homes, or smaller studios. Like I was running apartment buildings of 16 or 20 units that all kind of had 1 or 2 bedroom studios in them. So it was a big mix.
That's just like so daunting, the thought of that. And I have a larger apartment complex. It's a traditional apartment complex in Georgia. Third party management, I hardly ever think about it. But I mean, my 7 Airbnbs, I can't imagine. What did your team look like? Like, how'd you do that? What kind of team did you have to run 150 short-term rentals?
Yeah, so we were like 17 people. Essentially, that didn't include a lot of our third party kind of contractors or cleaners. Some of our maintenance guys, that wasn't necessarily included. But the way you stack a team like that is essentially you have 1 or 2 people who are in charge of guest messaging, 1 person who's in charge of revenue management. So that person is the one who's controlling and overseeing the pricing. Even if you're using a pricing tool like a Price Labs or Beyond Pricing, those do require maintenance and checking in and kind of updating and tweaking to really optimize. I had 2 quality and assurance people. I had a full-time maintenance guy, an accounting department, customer support department, deal flow for kind of sales, going out and finding new properties. Just your typical business in a lot of ways. Sales, customer support, a little bit less on the marketing side of things, just because back in the mid 2015, 16, 17 era, the direct booking game was less important. So people were really booking mostly on platforms like Airbnb and VRBO. For those of you who are getting more into vacation rentals and have 20, 30, 50, whatever it is, and you're starting to build out brands, marketing becomes a bigger thing. So we weren't really there, but in any event, that was kind of the loose stack. Oh, and then a full-time onboarding and procurement person. So that person's job was to set up new units once the lease was signed, make sure that they were launched properly, and find and source all of the things that needed to go inside of those homes, which again was like a big part of what Host GPO is now. But that was a full-time job of 1 person on my team.
And I think that's a perfect segue. And that's an impressive operation. The arbitrage business, I find it, I haven't done it. I've been well, how would I say this? I've been approached to be like the arbitragee. So I had a guy call me and he's like, I'm military. I just got out of this course. I want to check out your property. I love it. I go there and I meet him. It's my beautiful furnished Neptune Beach property. And he's like, I'm not sure if you've heard of this before, but I'm actually trying to arbitrage this property. And I'm standing there. I'm like, yes, I've heard of it. And he didn't know there's a 28-day minimum. He's like, I think I can work with this rate. I'm going to, I can go short. I'm like, there's a 28-day minimum in this city, and they like actually enforce it. And so we shook hands. I actually gave him my card. I told him to follow us on social media for tips, and he, wish him the best. But is it difficult, before we jump into like, your
Sure.
platform, do you find it, maybe you're not doing it today, but is it difficult, or what are the stumbling blocks with trying to do this arbitrage, going to a landlord or an owner and doing longer term agreements, and then arbitraging?
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of roadblocks along the way. They're all easy to overcome if you know the right the right answers, or you strategize it, or you've done it before, or you're set up for that kind of success. But just a few things out of the gate. The most common questions that people get are, I don't want strangers in my unit. My property is going to get destroyed. It's going to be a nuisance to the neighbors. How do I know that you're going to be successful and not default? Those are kind of like the typical types of questions. And the answers are really simple. Things like, great, I also care about the quality of your unit, and it's going to be in the best shape that it's ever been. I clean and inspect the unit multiple times a week, and it's literally do things like repaint and make sure that it looks great. It has to look great for what I'm doing, so it has to look great for you as well. Feel free to talk to these other hosts that or these other landlords that I've rented from before. They're great references for what I'm doing. How do you know that you're not going to default? Well, I haven't before. Here's my historic rent payments to other properties. You can either, if you are just getting out of the gate and you want to personally guarantee it, I don't necessarily recommend that, but you can. You can also do things if your capital is, if you're not super strapped for capital, you can prepay for, 3 or 4 months at a time, and do like some sort of, you could even get creative and do like some sort of burn back on your lease payments where you might pay 3-4 months or a 3-month security deposit, 4-month security deposit, and get that back after the first year, kind of 1 month or 2 months, right? So there are creative ways to solve that. This is going to be a nuisance for the neighbors. It won't. Have you heard about these tools that I use? Like I have cameras outside of the property. I use noise monitoring devices. I don't want there to be a nuisance because I don't want to lose the property. I will go and speak with the neighbors and make sure that they're okay with it. By the way, neighbors often end up renting the places for their family when they come to visit. There are a lot of benefits going that way as well. So, all of the things that you could possibly kind of come up with, this is going to be a headache for me as a landlord. The opposite. I'm going to take care of everything unless a pipe bursts in the wall. I'm never going to call you. If it's a plumbing issue, if it's something minor that's, under a couple $100, I'll just take care of it myself. I don't even want you to have to think about it. That's a dream tenant for a landlord in a lot of ways. So there are a lot of answers to these questions if you do it right, and you show up correct. And that also means knowing what the rules are and regulations, knowing what the laws are, becoming an expert first. Ian, that guy who showed up at your door and didn't know that you could do less than a 28-day rental, he was wasting his time, but at the same time, the guy got a free education at your expense. But know what you're getting into and be an expert when you walk in the door.
Man, guys, back that up 3 minutes and listen to it a few times. That was like a little mini mastermind right there. Excellent tips there, Jeff. All right, so going forward, and I just felt this pain. I renovated a property. It needed a lot of renovation. Needed fire suppression, it needed gas, needed an architectural remodel, needed a new floor plan, needed life safety plan. It was an office that I converted into 4 Airbnb units because of the zoning. Zoning was good. I can do nightlies. Everyone else without my zoning, 90-day minimum. So pretty good advantage there.
Awesome.
Anyways, I got, I got into furnishing this thing. And again, I wish I had met you ahead of time, but let's just say furnishing Airbnbs or short-term rentals, it can really, if you buy a property or arbitrage a property that is not furnished, and it's unlikely it's gonna be furnished the way you want it. And mine had nothing. Be prepared to open your checkbook, if you still carry a checkbook, to furnish these things. So let's jump into your host GPO platform and talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you mentioned, it's a very curated group of brands that we partner with, and we partner with them for very specific reasons. So on the one hand, you have some kind of very high design name brands. So your West Elms, your CB2s, your Article Furnitures. And one of the reasons why we partner with those is, when you go onto the Airbnb website and you look at what the pictures of that they're advertising for, Airbnbs are, all that stuff is like West Elm furniture, right? That's the gold standard for the design and high look that people want. And why do you want that furniture to begin with? Because ultimately, the vacation rental industry, and running Airbnbs or doing Airbnbs, first and foremost, you're a photographer, and you're showing people pictures of your listing that's competing against other pictures that are on there. So if you want to drive more clicks, your picture that shows up first better be real good. And so that higher design is the competitive advantage, just right out of the gate, getting people to click, having kind of more quality furniture, having things that look and seem like they're going to be great. Big initial thing. You want that first image always to be a really good one. Then there's the fact that you want to start buying furniture from brands like West Elm that are contract grade. And what that means is when you buy things on Amazon or Wayfair or whatever, you're not really sure what the quality is. Even the IKEA. Look, I'm not saying I didn't do this. I did all of it. I did all of that. Facebook Marketplace, Wayfair, IKEA, etc. I checked out of IKEA one time with 48 shopping carts. It was a terrible experience, but I've done it. Ultimately, though, you end up replacing this stuff every 8 months, 12 months, because the particle board coffee table is going to start warping, ripping, chipping, etc., and it's going to look terrible. So when somebody checks into your unit, they're going to feel the actual quality of the furniture that might have looked great in that picture, but it's going to be light, it's going to be broken, it's going to be poor, and you're going to start getting worse reviews on overall experience, on quality, accuracy, cleanliness, just because of actual damage issues, not because of the way that the unit was originally set up. So your long-term investment and your ROI on buying a piece of furniture really boils down to buy it nice, not twice, right? That's the idea. You want to buy something nice. It's going to last you enough time. Contract grade furniture is commercially tested for higher wear and tear. That's what it's there for. It's used in hotels. It's used in restaurants. That's the kind of stuff that you want to be putting in your vacation rental. Now, through Host GPO, you're able to purchase that West Elm coffee table or couch or whatever at like 40% off. And that actually is about the same price as your basic or mid-level like IKEA, Wayfair type furniture. And you're going to get higher quality furniture at around the same cost. You can pay a flat rate and have it delivered and installed. Like, these are all the hacks that make setting up, and tips and tricks that make setting up a vacation rental really streamlined. So, you have the kind of contract grade furniture, you have the discounts from these brands, and then you also have access to brands that you don't know about, but you need to. So something like Standard Textile is the best example of that. Standard Textile, I mean, Ian, have you ever heard of Standard Textile before?
I have not.
I had never heard of them either. And I was operating 100 something units before I found out about them. This is the largest hospitality linen company in the US. And this is who you want to buy, or this is who Marriott, Hyatt, Hilton, Ritz, I mean, all these giant hotel companies, they all buy sheets from this company. Now, they don't have a direct consumer great experience or website or anything like that. They're a hospitality linen company that's meant to sell to hotels and really vacation rental companies. So when you join Host GPO, you're able to purchase from them at 60 something percent off, and that pricing of those linens and towels, etc., comes out to around the same price as what you're buying from Amazon. But that stuff, is hard to wash. Stains don't come out. The quality doesn't feel great. It's not optimized for hundreds of washes. It doesn't have tags inside that tell you the different sizes of the sheets for your cleaners to use. And, all these kind of optimizations, quick dry, etc., that exist on the hospitality linen front. These don't exist on the Amazon or basic kind of linens that are out there. So again, Host GPO tries to streamline, curate, and present those options for you at a way that makes a ton of sense and saves you a ton of money overall in setting up and kind of running a vacation rental unit.
I really want to go to Amazon and see how much stuff I can return and then go on Host GPO and buy it all over again.
You wouldn't be the first one. I just talked to somebody that returned like 20 Nests that they ordered because they found out that Host GPO partners with Google Nest.
Oh my God. I know. I just put like 7 locks, like e-locks on, and it took a long time I didn't do it. My handyman did it, but by the time I pay him hourly, and they're kind of complicated to install and they're not cheap to begin with. I just found out they don't integrate with my Host software right now. And I'm just like, I mean, for those that are listening that don't have any short-term rentals, it's an interesting world. It can be super high yield and awesome, or it can be a nightmare and you bail. And the stuff that Jeff's talking about and some of the lessons that he and I have both learned, him on a much greater scale, can make or break it, because you have got to systematize. It will stress test you if you don't have pardon my French, if you don't have your shit together. You're going to want out of the industry immediately, or you're just going to quickly call up Jeff or a local manager, pay 20% and just be done. But I think, not to dog the short-term rental managers, I mean, if you can systematize and get some of the stuff dialed in, and you can do a small portfolio on your own with good systems, in my opinion. You just have to commit to it.
100%. Yeah, it's definitely possible. You just got to learn, and that learning curve initially is pretty steep. But one thing that we try to do is make the setup and furnishing part of it easier. We'll give you a checklist of everything you need for inside your property for free. I mean, it's no sweat off our back, but we're trying to make sure that we can allow you to get the quality and types of things that you need, and help educate people on how to set up the listings the right way.
I mean, that checklist I think would be critical. It's so I've set up, like I said, all the ones I own, all 7, but you forget stuff. Like you're like, oh, we're ready to open. And then I think this is a common recommendation. You might get to where you can't do this, but I think if you can, you should stay in your unit before you go live. And every time we've stayed, I'll usually I have 3 children, 2 young ones, and we'll stay in the unit. And every time there's like a list of, there might be like a half dozen things, you know, that might not be big things. It's like you forgot about towels, but you're going to forget little things. You're like, oh, like there's no coffee filters, or, you know, or there's whatever it is, you know, we're missing like critical silverware, or there's no mugs, there's, you know, stuff like that. And, anyways, a checklist would be wonderful. I think that's a smart thing to offer. So,
Yeah.
Man, you got my mind spinning. I know I'm like way off script, which is fine. I don't really care about my script, but I just the short-term rental world, I think it's where it's really a hot topic right now too. So I think like, cause I'm in real estate. I've been in real estate 17 years, been an investor for a while. There's so many ways to make money in real estate, but I think the guys that buy or arbitrage in good locations with killer photos, a good furniture, they're still outperforming because, and I'm sure you have an opinion on this, but Airbnb room night demand is up. However, there are more units on than there were. So you do have some like sagging occupancy stats across Airbnb nationally. But again, bear in mind, the demand is higher than ever. So I'll give you my 2 cents. My properties are either near the ocean or entertainment districts. So I'm only in like nice walkable pedestrian locations.
Sure.
And I'm in areas where there's no, from a true real estate perspective, high barrier to entry to ever build a hotel. There might be a couple of hotels nearby that have been there a while, but there's no land to build anymore. And Smart. If there is, it's so damn expensive if there is, or there's height limitations at the beach where I am, and it's not happening. So a high barrier to entry. And then I've been lately thinking about adding things to really distinguish us. So I bought a couple of street legal golf carts that I'm going to add to the beach rentals. And I will say, don't jump into that. Like, I'll tell you what I think in a couple more episodes. I'm still stress testing that, but the commercial insurance to do street legal golf carts and the actual transfer of possession keys and leasing agreement is a little tricky. I'm still ironing that out. However, there's high margins in some of these ancillary income things, like an e-bike, a golf cart, maybe a traditional bicycle.
I just talked to a guy who was doing jet ski rentals at his property as an additional income stream, and he's like, he thinks he just launched it, but I think he's planning on doing at least half of his profit a month for that unit in additional income just from renting out jet skis.
That's awesome. We did we're bouncing around this episode. I don't care. My in-laws and I always do a lake house trip. So I live in Florida. We go up to usually this lake called Lake Hartwell. It's pretty big. It goes through South Carolina and Georgia. It's it's dammed, not condemned by God, but it's dammed. And and it's this big freshwater lake, and pontoons are super popular there. And we used to always rent places 5-6 years ago that the pontoon would be included. And then that just like stopped. And I don't know, I'm thinking it was like maybe insurance or liability or something. I mean, we're both attorneys. We could probably figure that out. Probably a liability issue with like homeowners insurance. However, the companies that are like third-party vendors, like renting out pontoons and boats or jet skis, they charge so much. And sometimes we do it. We're like, oh, do we want to pool together and spend $500 to like rent a boat for a day? And by God, sometimes you do it. So I think it's kind of like adjacent to being a property. It's not like, it's more like being a business owner than like a real estate owner, but it's so complementary and it's going to drive the demand at your real estate. I think people, if you're going to be in this short-term game, remember you're in hospitality. You're not some old, quiet, landlord. You are in hospitality. There's schools for hospitality. So I do caution people, if you don't have a hospitality bone in your body, you probably don't need to rush into being an Airbnb host. You need to have like a client first mindset. That's just my opinion, but I worked restaurant and hotel growing up, and it's not for everybody. Not everybody has like the service gene.
Yeah, I mean, it'll drive you nuts if that's not in your DNA, and guests are messaging you asking for the Wi-Fi, and you're like, there's a sticker on the fridge with the code, like, just look there. If little things like that are going to bother you, yeah, that's probably is not the right space. Or
Exactly.
find a manager.
Yeah, or get a manager. I think that's it. Bear in mind, you're arbitraging in the ownership space in these like high barrier to entry markets. It's difficult to pencil if you don't self-manage. I'm not saying you can't, but these properties are so expensive. I mean, I've got a duplex. I got a duplex by the ocean in Neptune Beach, conservatively worth like $1.25 million. I mean, I didn't buy it at that price, but it's like, you can't just scale up your short-term rental portfolio by the beach at those prices. You might be able to do like rent a condo, arbitrage that, rent something else. But it's like, anyway, so we've thought about internally adding some third-party management since now our portfolios, this kind of sounds like it happened to you. Your portfolio gets to a point where you're already elbow deep in the game. It's not that big of a thing to just add on co-host third-party management, especially at 25 or 20%.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, look, the other alternative is that, you could take it in-house, right? You could just hire somebody full-time to manage your 7 properties or 10 properties, when you get there, and pay that person a salary as opposed to, a percentage or some sort of blend. I mean, I know folks that have 10, 20 units and they pay somebody like a base level salary and then 5% of income, or, just to incentivize them to also care about the performance of the units. But there's a lot of different ways to structure it and a lot of different deals out there. But ultimately, the last thing you want to be doing is doing it yourself and not knowing what you're doing. That's the one way for sure you will fail. If you're not dynamically pricing or using the right software, or listed on both Airbnb and VRBO, like, because you don't know that they exist, or whatever it is, right? You're not hiring a professional photographer to take your photos. I mean, that's like you might as well just light your money on fire. If you're not going to pay a photographer to take pictures of your listing and make it look professional, these are the kinds of things that are just absolutely essential.
And you know what? The iPhone takes good photos, but guess what? The professional property photographer, he takes better ones, or she. And I've known that a long time. I've been a Florida broker for 16, 17 years. And what's funny is I do mostly commercial and investment when it comes to brokerage. And the commercial guys were like lagging on this. It's like the residential people were quick to figure out like good photos, aerials, drones, virtual tours, blah, 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 blah. And like the crusty commercial guys were like, like a couple photos with their phone, crappy descriptions, pretty much just say, call me. And now I see commercial kind of like catching up, sometimes exceeding. It depends on the value of the asset. But the takeaway is, by God, get a professional and maybe one that specializes in these hospitality or short-term rentals, because what I've noticed is, I didn't plan on talking about this, but I had my favorite, I hope he's not listening. I had my favorite photographer photograph my last short-term rental, and he did a good job with it. I'm using the photos now. But I'm looking at my competition. I got one in mind. I'm not going to drop their name. I'm not that kind of show. I like them, but they're, we're competitors, and their stuff's better. And what it is like, you're kind of think about how you would photograph like a restaurant or, this hospitality product. It might be like a little bit of the backsplash and like the gleam of the glass and like, the stuff like that. Whereas like normal property photography, you want 2 sides of a building. You want this angle, you want this light, fisheye lens in the bathroom if it's tight. And there's some of these little tips and tricks that for sure you might need somebody who can kind of cross over. Maybe they've shot hospitality or restaurant or like lifestyle photos in addition to property.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I've had some of my vacation rentals shot by product photographers that do amazing jobs, right? And it's because I think they understand that what you're selling is different on a residential or on a real estate side, on even commercial or residential for a sale, right? You're selling physical space, but when you're photographing short-term rentals, you're selling an experience of staying in a home, which is just a super different thing.
So I'm going to fast forward a little bit in the sake of time, because I could go long on you, because it says we have a lot of overlap. Two recovering attorneys that are having fun in short-term rentals, but what are where are things going for you? What are some of your goals? Let's kind of move the lens a little bit as we kind of move towards the back end here.
Yeah. So I think, one of the big things for me for Host GPO over the next, I don't know, 6 months, a year, is one, continuing to grow the group. As the group gets bigger and more people join, the ability to get discounts and larger discounts and bring on new vendors also grows. So it's cool. It's a strength in numbers thing. So growing the group and at the same time growing new vendors. So we partner with everybody from like a Terminix and an Ace Hardware and Rugs USA, all the way to your mattresses, etc. But what we don't have yet are things like services. So I'd love Host GPO to be able to partner with companies like AT&T and Spectrum and Verizon, right, to get you discounts on your internet and things like that for your vacation rental unit. So that's kind of one thing that we're looking for and forward to. We're also in the US and Canada right now, but we are not in a bunch of other countries. So that's kind of part of our expansion plan for this year as well. So that's kind of like the roadmap for the next 6 months.
Do you have, and maybe it's already there, I haven't completely dug through your platform.
Sure.
Do you have any discounts or agreements with like national or franchised housekeeping?
No, we don't yet. We are talking to a couple companies. One of the problems with doing that is that you can't partner with one company, and we don't really want to, because you can't guarantee the quality of the service across the board. And so what I don't want is people being like, oh, I'm super unhappy. We're kind of having this with some of our partners that are franchise type models, where it's like, your local service company, and some of the experiences are just better than other experiences. And we hate to put anything on our site that's not the best. That being said, there are companies that operate on a national basis, like Turnover B&B, which is a great option for looking for vacation rental cleaners, because it's really just a marketplace for cleaners to bid out your property. So there are some solutions like that we try to highlight, and we're going to try to feature some of those moving forwards on our portal as well.
I like that. And I can see the problem with, you have more of the human element when it's a service versus like, your bulk West Elm, or like your standard textile, like you mentioned. Interesting. So when I was in my 20s, I was appraisal was my first baby in real estate, commercial appraisal. And I became like the hotel guy. My firm did every asset class commercially. My brother did a bunch of subdivisions and golf courses. I got a lot of the hotels, and we did industrial, office, retail, everything. So it was interesting because I kind of, almost 15 years ago, I was in all these hotels and kind of watching their operations. Never in a million years did I think I'd be running like my own little portfolio of like, it's like a little scattered hotel. And like you had
For sure.
You had like a big ass scattered hotel. I mean, 150 of these things and bi-coastal. But I think for some of the listeners, this might be an area where you could make a splash. And by splash, I mean like impact and income and scale faster than what you might hear me talk about on other episodes, like multifamily, land entitlement, stuff like that. But again, it does take a certain hospitality bone, unless you just want to outsource everything. And then I think it's kind of hard to control your destiny.
And it takes a lot of hustle. It takes a lot of hustle too. I mean, you really got to put, especially at the beginning, it's a quick learning curve to get all the stuff under your belt. But once you do it a handful of times, replicating it and doing it over and over again becomes a lot easier.
I'm going to hit you with, I didn't warn you about this, but I hit you with the Coach Brown breakdown here. We got 4 questions. They're not too hard. And if it doesn't go well, we'll just edit it out.
Perfect.
What's the most impactful business or personal development book you've read?
Atomic Habits.
Oh, I love that one. Jeff, I think we're friends.
That's a really good one.
It is.
I also recently read Getting to Yes, which I thought was a great book on negotiation.
Oh man, I just got my wife doesn't really read like personal development stuff. But I got her on Atomic Habits, and now she's talking about like habit stacking, and she like squats while she's brushing her teeth. I'm like, yes. Yes. Oh
yeah.
man.
Yeah, habit
Okay.
stacking is where it's at.
Hell yeah. when you're not scaling and getting vendors to give you discounts and jump in your portfolio, what do you do for fun?
I'm a musician. So I play saxophone, and I'm playing a show tonight. So there you go.
Hey, you are full of surprises. I love this. I got to stop with these crossovers. People are gonna think I'm making this shit up, but I played sax because like when I was in junior high, you had to be in choir or in band, and it was like cool to be in band, not cool to be in choir. And I didn't have a mind of my own back then, so I went into band, and they needed somebody to play sax, and I think Bill Clinton was president at that time, and I was like, sax it is. You know what I mean?
There you go.
That's cool. All right, number 3, your best yield coach advice for eager entrepreneurs.
Best yield coach advice.
Well, that's our platform. So yeah, your coach, your coach for a moment here. Put on the coach hat.
The best advice for increasing yield. I mean, one thing I'll say is I think a lot of people try to go from 0 to 100 really fast. And a lot of what I talked about today was, scaling from, 0 down and really low amounts of initial income to, 7-figure potential, that kind of stuff. But one thing I really think is important is you have to do every job yourself before you scale and bring somebody else on. And I think that a lot of people try to jump from 0 to 100 without realizing that, especially if you're about to do something like get in the short-term rental game, I mean, message the guests yourself, set up the property yourself, be there on installation day, do a cleaning, stay in the home, right? Go through the experiences and go through the motions yourself. Even if you're going to end up hiring or farming it out or getting somebody else to do it, there's no way to understand what that role is. Do every job in your company or in your business yourself first.
Wonderful. Well said. And lastly, where can people connect with you and find more about Host GPO?
You can head to Host GPO, and that's GPO for Group Purchasing Organization. So hostgpo.com, or follow us on all the socials, Host GPO.
Wonderful. Yeah, we just followed you on Instagram. You got good stuff there. I really enjoyed this episode, and it clearly hit home, as the audience can tell. All right, guys, if you enjoyed this one, share it with a friend, jump on, give it a rate, give it a subscribe. Jeff was a killer guest. We'd love to have more like him. This was really fun. Again, this will be on, all your stuff, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, every outlet. So keep trying to grow. But for now, guys, this is the Yield Coach Show. Coach Ian Brown signing off and reminding everybody to lace up and leave it all on the field. Yield Coach out.